Hello everyone, welcome. Today basically what we're just going to do is a little bit of a talk about nutrition, and I'm joined by
Filomena, Vernace and Sarah. I'm a registered dietitian, and I've known Aaron now, would you say for about 5 years or so?
Yeah, I'd say 2020 or
Yeah.
so we met. So obviously I'm just going to be asking Filomena a bunch of questions just about nutrition, kind of my 12-week journey, and we might get into a little bit of topics about nutrition overall, what's happening on social media, or even just in the world. So Filomena, thank you for doing this.
Of course, this is a lot of fun.
Thanks. Okay, so first of all, can you just tell everyone just a little bit about yourself? Why'd you get into, being a dietitian? When you started all the way till now?
Yeah, for sure. So I have been a practicing dietitian now for over 30 years. So I have evolved in the field of nutrition over time, working from hospital-based practice and then moving into private practice. And so I really chose to pursue nutrition from a very personal reason. And that really just stems from significant chronic disease being prevalent in my family, and having been exposed to that at a very young age as a little girl, and having seen family members really suffer devastating effects of diabetes and heart disease. And so I was really intrigued by, as a little girl, just in terms of what we could do to prevent it. And I'm very inspired because of, my grandmother, and she had type 2 diabetes and unfortunately suffered amputation and stroke. And, it had such a huge rippling effect to our family. And I remember doctors saying, she needed to stop hiding cookies in her house coat. And I thought, oh my goodness, like what are cookies doing that are causing such devastating effects? So I remember this as a little girl, and I guess I was just always so intrigued by science and health and what I had been exposed to as a kid, and how I had seen specific family members just really, lose their life at a very young age. So I was intrigued from that point of nutrition and diet and lifestyle, and how we could modulate, our family history, because it really isn't a good one. And so I found nutrition and I found dietetics, and I did my training at Ryerson University, and it's an undergraduate training program. So it is a full 4-year program. It is a science-based degree. And then to become a licensed registered dietitian, we are college regulated. So that means, everything that we say or do as a dietitian is definitely needs to be science-backed and evidence-based, because we are liable, and the College of Dietitians is there to protect people. And that's an important distinction, Aaron, when we're talking about nutrition professionals, particularly in terms of the advice that they may be giving on different channels, YouTube, social media. When you're listening to a so-called social media influencer, a YouTuber, what are their qualifications? What are their background? And why are they promoting specific things? Are they selling certain things? Those are all kind of red flags, because as dietitians, we're really specific in what we're able to do and how to do it.
I think that's very valuable that, you at a young age had been experienced with, have family that have all these types of diseases. And I think for you, you wanted to make a big impact. So obviously going down the nutrition part has really helped you establish a good knowledge of nutrition and its effects on just disease as well, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, all that. So I think that's very valuable. And I think also you're just helping a lot of people prevent that as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, prevention is key. Obviously, we want you to feel your best, and we want you to do it in a way that's sustainable and realistic. I often talk about the pendulum swing with my clients, and you might have even heard me talk about it in our sessions, because most people will come and they want to swing to being so strict and so rigid, and following whatever trend is in season at the time, and just realizing that that's just so difficult to sustain, and then that pendulum swings right back to old habits, because it's just not sustainable. And so where a lot of my experience was in chronic disease and working in hospital-based care, and now in community, And I'm still seeing a lot of the same type of chronic issues, but we're spending a lot of time and people just not feeling well, just not feeling their best. And especially since COVID, we're seeing many clients coming in and just saying, you know, I just don't feel like myself. I don't feel like I'm my best version of myself. And so while we're not really chasing a particular problem, what we're really chasing is just feeling good in your body. And that can be done, you know, with a very wide, different lens that doesn't have to be so strict and so rigid. And unfortunately, I feel like for a lot of individuals who are looking for that kind of information, that's what they feel they need to do. And they fail. And because it is set up to fail that way. So when you've got a rigid diet, you've got a rigid plan, we know that that doesn't work, right? What we try to do in our office and what I've tried to do with you is really reinforce consistency. So giving you guidelines, working with your busy schedule, that personalization is really key in really figuring out where you're struggling. But you know, you need to also invest time in yourself, and investing time in yourself is part of your self-care. And nutrition is a huge part of self-care. And unfortunately, it seems like many people feel like that time is just not there, or they just don't have the time. And folks, remember, you know, nutrition is what gives you sustainability to your life. That's what gives you energy to be. And so we've got to carve time out to ensure that we are nourishing our bodies and we are providing our bodies with the right nutrients and building blocks so that we can, in fact, feel our best.
Yeah, very well said. I think one thing I want to tackle, you mentioned that people need to carve out time to obviously invest in their nutrition, and just obviously one thing I would like to add is build habits on top of that. Given, you know, society, and especially in the GTA or even in a busy city like Toronto or Vaughan or whoever, people are getting more busier and busier every year. You know, how do you as a dietitian kind of tackle that? Because the most common thing you'll probably get, and I get too, is like, oh, I'm too busy. I just don't have time. I'm too busy. I got to go here. How do you kind of tackle that situation? Because I think that's a very valuable thing. Because people are just like, I don't have time. I'll just go eat out, or I'll go get something, or I'll get the made meals already delivered to me. So how do you kind of tackle that as a dietitian with some of your clients?
Yeah. You know, there's different ways of doing things. It's not one size fits all. It's not going to be one approach that's going to work for everybody. So for me, it's really just getting to know the client. And so if that client means, look, I, you know, head to a hot table and that's what's going to work for me for lunch, perfect. Okay, let's work with that. It doesn't always have to be a home cooked meal. It could be components of things that we bring together, right? So I think the food industry, grocery stores have done a fantastic job at providing conveniences. So whether it be zoodles, which are already done for you, or chopped up vegetables, or platters of vegetables that are ready to go, why can't we incorporate some of these conveniences to help people along? Because it's true, we are busy, but we also have to understand that everybody's going to come at this with different priorities in their lives at this particular time. So if this is something that's truly important for you and this is your journey that you're willing to start, then it becomes something that is what I call a non-negotiable, right? There are certain things that we do in our day that are non-negotiable. You know, we get up, we get dressed, we present in a certain way to society. It's the same for nutrition. You know, you have to ensure that you've got some groceries in your fridge that you could work with to pull together a healthy meal. And you and I have talked about this a lot. If you've got those staples in the fridge, in your freezer, in your pantry, you can still build easy, simple meals, but there's got to be intention. Right? So you've got to bring intention every single day and say, I'm worthy, I'm worth it, I want to put good food into my body. It's not about pursuing a specific weight loss goal, but pursuing wellness, feeling your best, feeling that energy, knowing that systems are working well. And we get a really good sense too from gut health, right? You know, how you feed your body is often going to be exerted in different ways, and how your body is working. So when that becomes a non-negotiable, it's basically something that you just do. It's not something that you give yourself an option to do, right? It's not something where I'm like, oh, maybe I'll choose to eat today. No, you need to eat to live. And so how are we going to then now take that to that next level to say, all right, I'm really going to invest some time to make these choices more optimal, more varied, more colored, whatever it is. Add some vegetables to that. If you're eating a hamburger, skip the soda, get the water, add a side salad if you can. So there's different ways of going about this. It's not just one way. And I feel sometimes, as dietitians, we are tarnished in a way in that some individuals may think that it's like, oh, we teach you the Canada's Food Guide. We're a lot more than that, by the way. And we actually take that personalized approach and we get to learn you and understand you and what is holding you back, right? Mm-hmm. Nutrition is a day-long commitment. And while other health approaches like fitness and exercise are crucial to putting, this whole plan together, it's something that you do, it's an hour and a half, check mark, you're done, you move on with your day. Mm-hmm. Nutrition is a day-long commitment to how you hydrate your body, how you fuel your body during the day, either through meals or through snacks, and that requires commitment. Mm-hmm. And that requires consistency. Mm-hmm. And that's where I feel people really lose when they're chasing a particular fad diet or they're chasing something that sounds too good to be true. That consistency is not going to be there because it's just not sustainable. So if you're choosing to fast, or you're choosing to cut out particular categories of food, or you're choosing to eat very little during the day, your body is going to outsmart you because it's all about survival, right? It's your body is going to scream at you through cravings, through an inability to stop eating because you may have lost that intuitive nature of understanding satiety, because it's always eating on the go and not being mindful. So we really try to bring all these elements of intention and mindfulness, respecting your body's needs, hearing your body's cues, and recognizing that food is fuel and it's going to power up every single cell in your body. And if you're choosing to ignore that, your body will eventually start to scream at you and say, hey, pay attention. And it may come not in the right way, but that's where those cravings and those particular sugar cravings start to come in, where people are like, oh, I have a sugar craving. I'm addicted to sugar. I'll never be able to get over it. Like, just take a minute. We're going to figure this out. And as soon as we start, fueling more regularly throughout the day, those sugar cravings are minimized to disappear for most people, and are no longer, have this control over them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the clients that we both work with, like, she was basically not eating enough throughout the day, and then she would tell me like, oh yeah, I would come home hungry, and then I would kind of have those cravings for salt and vinegar chips or junk food, and then kind of just go on a rampage. And then she would wonder, well, I'm not eating anything throughout the day, but I'm still like the same weight, or I'm gaining weight. And what you just talked about is just not fueling yourself throughout the body as well as throughout the day, and not also being mindful of what you're putting into your mouth as well.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt
you.
One of the things also I want to tackle is, you mentioned being mindful, also just eating throughout the day, and just also going out if you have to, if you're busy, and maybe going to a grocery store and going to a hot table. A lot of people will say, well, that's not healthy food. Oh, I can't eat that. And they put those restrictions on themselves. What are the harmful side effects long-term that will happen when they start putting restrictions on themselves? As well as, we talked about social media, people putting restrictions on, I can't eat carbs, or I have to avoid oils, or I have to just eat, keto, carnivore, etc. What are the long-term, I would guess, side effects of that, mentally and physically?
First of all, that's food shaming. And that just falls into diet culture. And diet culture has really taken a strong hold on today's society because it's in our face. The phones are constantly in our hands, and we're exposed to TikToks and videos and messages that never end. And so this is where this food shaming comes in, because it's, not perfect, or it needs to be like specifically made in a certain way. With the amount of food insecurity that exists, and the amount of people that are not able to afford even a meal on the table, as dietitians, we're well versed in this area, and it's very important to talk about food security And if you can get a meal and you can get a meal that is going to be nourishing, let's not food shame. Let's not, criticize and go down that, again, that very deep, dark rabbit hole of good food, bad food, ideal food. There are true families, individuals that are struggling here, and the majority of users of food banks are children. So we need to have these conversations. So we have to look at making the best possible decision based on where you're at. And so if that means, that you can afford a boxed food or you can afford a canned product, there are so many ways to make that healthier, right? So it may be that you can incorporate protein through a canned legume. Well, some people are like, well, I don't use canned foods because I soak my beans and I cook them for like an hour the next day. You might not have that time or want to do that.
Just a side note, a legume is a bean.
A high protein substitute.
Yeah, some people
food.
are going to say, what's a legume?
Yeah, it's a bean, a dried bean.
Yeah.
Right? So those are the more economical, aspects of healthy eating. And so I think that we have to stop food shaming. And social media is full of food shaming, which is just part of the diet culture, which is part of body shaming and this pursuit of this ideal thinness, or through fads and through extreme weight loss, which is very concerning from a health perspective, but also a mental health perspective. So it's very key that the messaging that we provide to individuals is like, do the best that you can, and know that you can still put together a very colored, varied, healthy meal that doesn't have to come from a home cooked place. It could come from different avenues. So if it means that you're not at that place yet of making a lunch and you're going to go out for lunch, then look what's around you and see what options are available that you can start to incorporate more of a balanced approach to eating, where we're incorporating lots of color through vegetables, fruits, good protein sources, which could be inexpensive just the same, like your legumes or eggs, or it doesn't have to be, expensive fish. It could be other choices as well. And so make the best possible decision, but nourish your body. That is the key. Like, this is not about, chasing an extreme ideal. It's about coming back to the basics and really looking at food as nourishing your body physically and mentally. It's so key.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing about nourishing your body mentally and physically, especially with me, like I noticed, I think you mapped this out, it's like you're not getting enough fiber throughout the day, as well as vegetables and water, etc. One thing I like to add is, for people that are watching, how much fiber should they get throughout the day, as well as protein, how much should they get throughout the day, and how important is that as nourishing your body? Because I think fiber plays a role in the gut as well, right?
Big role in the gut. And this is what's exciting me so much of the field of dietetics, is that there's two main areas that have been really gaining a lot of momentum in research, and that is genetic connection to food and food therapy through nutrigenomics and gut health. And so although we try to simplify messages like, Erin, you need to get more dietary fiber, and this is what I want you to incorporate, behind that messaging is so much nutrition information that we're trying to build in from, let's say, a gut health perspective. We know that that's going to, feed the army of bacteria that's in your gut. And that's critical, because we're realizing, and only really in the last decade or so, that bacteria that's in our microbiome are turning on and off genes and are really making a difference in terms of health, in terms of chronic disease, and even in terms of weight management. We never looked at gut bacteria in terms of what they could be modulating for genes in terms of weight. And so, when we're failing at trying to manage this weight, let's embrace everyone's diversity. Let's understand that we're not chasing a particular body size, that we can celebrate different shapes and sizes, but know that there could be other mechanisms that we're missing. So when we're telling you to eat your vegetables It's not because we're following the Canada's Food Guide, but what we're saying to you is those foods, particularly vegetables and fruit, contain components to that the bacteria feed off of. So you're strengthening the numbers, you're increasing the diversity through probiotic rich foods, and it's critical to help with satiety and making you feel full and satisfied and slowing down appetite, which can all be different strategies to achieve different outcomes. But I'm super excited about the messaging around dietary fiber and probiotics that you get naturally in food and in certain supplements to diversify the gut bacteria, because we know those little friendly bacteria are going to be cornerstone to a lot of therapy that we're going to be moving forward with, whether it be cholesterol lowering, blood sugar management, and so on. In terms of how much, most women were recommending 25 grams of dietary fiber per day, men 38 grams of dietary fiber per day. So look, there's, lots of nutrition information on packaging. Spend some time and consider what you're buying and how you can make simple swaps in the grocery store that will incorporate more whole foods. And that really is an important message for individuals to realize. Look, a whole grain bread could still be part of a healthy diet, but you might want to look at one that has more dietary fiber or perhaps a bit more protein, one that's whole grain and doesn't have any processed refined grains in there. Take some time. And as a dietitian in the grocery store, I'm watching you. I like to people watch, just ask my family. I really like to see what patterns there are when we're grocery shopping. And most of us are flying down those aisles, just grabbing packages because we're like in and out because we're at the grocery store every day. And that signals to me lack of meal planning. That signals to me a lack of an actual approach where you're not having to spend and waste a lot of time in the grocery stores on a day-to-day basis or every 2 days buying groceries. Plan it out where you can then be very strategic to get some of these whole foods that will help to increase dietary fiber. And especially for me as a woman, protein intake is a challenge for many women, and particularly once we start getting to a certain age where that starts to fall off, and that could really impact how our body then repairs and builds, which if we're being physically active, that's an important part of how you're training your clients. If we're not providing that recovery, if we're not providing adequate protein throughout the day, that could be an issue. So generally how I recommend adequate protein is, look, protein just doesn't come from meat and chicken and fish. So you don't have to always have that on your plate. You've got, dairy products are a fantastic source of protein, whether it be Greek yogurt, whether it be cottage cheese, whether it be firm cheeses. Those can be fantastic options to incorporate more protein in your diet. And having some of that at your main meals as well as at snack time can really help to add in more dietary protein throughout the day. So, our national guidelines usually recommend anywhere around 0.8 to 1.2 grams per kilograms per day. We tend to be in and around that. But again, that's where the personalized approach comes in. Sometimes we go a little bit more or we scale back a little depending on what other comorbidities might be there, or if they've got specific training goals that we're trying to achieve. So, there's the art of nutrition, is that we kind of tailor it and modify it according to the person that we're working with at that time.
Yeah, those are good points. I want to touch upon, you mentioned the food guide a bunch of times, and I've heard stuff on social media where they're saying, the food guide is terrible because it's just all carbs and stuff like that. And this goes back to obviously influences in social media, saying carbs are bad. If you can just touch upon the food guide, is there any concerns you have with the food guide that currently now and how we can improve it? Or is it just people are just not doing what they have to do or following the food guide in general?
Yeah. Well, listen, the Canada's Food Guide, and not to, downplay it at all, it is, a tool that we use to teach, and it has gone through tremendous revision. Gone are the days where we had specific servings attached to the food guide. That's all gone. And we've gone from like a rainbow to now a balanced plate. So visually, when you're looking at it, it can actually help to formulate more of a visual of how people can plate their food. And the revised Canada's Food Guide went through a lot of consultation and really did try to remove any influence from food industry on there. And so we've listened very carefully to Canadians, what their concerns were. And I feel with this edition of the food guide, which I believe was revised in 2018, really helps to more visually guide Canadians towards a balanced approach to eating that mimics a lot of the Mediterranean dietary pattern, which is, again, lots of vegetables, color, and fruit on their plates with a proportion of those legumes, smaller amounts of meat. What most people don't realize when they take a look at the food guide and they take a look at this plate is that it's actually quite proportioned. So, the quadrant that we look at protein, there's a lot more alternatives on there. There's lentils, there's legumes, and there's a tiny amount of red meat. There's, smaller amounts of white meat, but in greater proportion than red. Those are all messaging that Health Canada is trying to give to individuals to say, look, protein can come from a diverse type of foods. It does not have to just come from animal meats. And we're really encouraging more fish and more alternatives in addition to small amounts of red meat and also white meats. So when we take a look at the Mediterranean diet, which has been studied extensively, which supports a lot of the chronic disease prevention guidelines, so whether it be high blood pressure, whether it be cancer prevention, whether it be cardiovascular disease prevention, the Mediterranean dietary pattern, which incorporates lifestyle recommendations as well as dietary recommendations, still is the number one dietary pattern to follow. So that's really great for your listeners to take some time to understand what that is. So it's about being social, it's about being active, it's about enjoying your meals. It's not about restriction and it's not about deprivation. That there's really this approach to living that helps to support our well-being. And it just doesn't come from food. It's truly a holistic approach on how we live our lives each and every day.
I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
Because I know someone's going to ask this question or come back at this and say, well, that's great, Filomena, Mediterranean, like Italy, Greece, but they live a simple life where they're not constantly stressed. They don't have a busy life.
I wonder if they would agree with you, though.
Well,
I wonder if they would agree with you, right?
That's just the way I kind of
see it,
as well as people have told me.
Yeah.
And they're just like, they're not like this. They, enjoy their life, as well as the food there is different than our food here, because theirs is not, theirs doesn't have like all these preservatives, as well as the flour is different. And also I've heard from people saying, when you go to Italy, like the flour, the pasta is different. You feel better. You don't feel as bloated as when you eat here. Just a little devil's advocate. How do you kind of respond to that?
Remember, when we're talking about the Mediterranean dietary pattern, we're talking about the origins of the Mediterranean diet, not necessarily their Mediterranean diet right now.
Yeah.
Right? So we're really going back to a time where, researchers have looked at what, specific regions we're looking at, so everything that kind of surrounded the Mediterranean Sea. And it may not necessarily be how they're living and eating currently right now. So we're looking at more of the authentic Mediterranean diet, living off the land, having more whole foods that have not been highly processed or refined. So that's what I want your listeners to remember. When we're talking about Mediterranean diet, we're not going to Italy and saying, oh, that's the Mediterranean diet that they're following, because that's truly not what we're talking about. We're talking about mostly, how they used to tend to the land, live off the land, keep it to whole foods, and that lifestyle of just socializing and eating together, which now if you have been to Europe, often that's not the case either. They still have, I think, a very interesting way of life in comparison to us, for sure. But, they're running around too, and they're often, skipping meals and, eating very late. And so I think that's a phenomenon that's kind of worldwide now.
Yeah, that's fair. I think one thing I want to touch upon is going forward. We talked about habits, everything like that. We have to put effort in, it's our job. And we also get to do shopping, we get to nourish our body, work out. So, one thing I want to touch upon is with the current landscape of everything, how do we, I would say, uncure or what is the best way to unlearn certain strict habits that people are developing and following diets? How do we kind of unlearn all that?
Yeah, I really feel, first of all, we need to quote unquote detoxify ourselves from social media. Take a very close look at what you're following, who's coming up on your feed, and also the people that you're surrounding yourself by. If you are surrounding yourself with a lot of toxic people that talk about, body image and their body shaming, and they're constantly talking about diets, and that's making you feel uncomfortable and that doesn't make you feel positive, you need to start clearing of that. Yeah. That's so critical. Secondly, it's mindset. It always comes back to mindset. What are you chasing? Are you chasing a particular number on that scale? Are you chasing a particular look? Are you chasing a sense of well-being where you are truly working towards your forever? When I instruct you or I instruct any other clients, this is your forever. This is what you're going to be doing forever. This is not short term. This is not a quick fix. This isn't something that you go quick and dirty to only fall off and return and learn nothing from that. So how do you unlearn it? Take a deep look in. Understand what you're truly looking for yourself. Stop comparing yourself to other people. Stop chasing the quick fixes, the false promises, the cures that people are suggesting on social media through supplements. That's a huge problem. I had a realtor tell me yesterday that you could cure hypothyroidism. Who are we kidding? And how are these claims coming about? And you're wanting me to sell your product? That's not what I do as a dietitian, by the way. I have huge concerns about what promises are out there. So be very mindful of the messaging that you're receiving through the channels that you're watching, the people that are surrounding you, and what you're really looking for yourself. If you're looking for a sustainable way, hire the right professionals. Get a certified personal trainer who is qualified, who has the educational background. Work with a registered dietitian. A nutritionist is an unregulated profession. Anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. They are not going to be held liable to anything that they say or do.
Yeah.
So ensure that you're working with the right professionals who are going to guide you to the goals that you're wanting to go to, because that's super important. So surround yourself with key experts that are reliable and evidence-based and are licensed, college regulated. Watch what you're listening to each and every day, and find an approach that you can, in fact, live by every single day and work towards every single day. None of this on again, off again, on again, off again. We all know that that's not a healthy way to live.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah, already. Wow.
Wow. Do you have any final thoughts for anyone who's listening here about just diet culture in general, or just the way you see nutrition in the future?
Yeah. I think that as a profession, we're really working hard at chasing a lot of the quackery that's out there. So I'm going to see that as being something that our profession will continue to evolve at trying to tackle. For sure, we have a responsibility to do that. Diet culture will always exist. But we have been making a lot of strides with regards to health at every size and intuitive eating, and really trying to talk more about the whole person as opposed to just focusing in on one aspect of them, whether it be disease or whether it be weight or something else. So I think in terms of what we're moving towards is a much more balanced approach. It's one that, we have to work at and commit to, and it's our social responsibility as, qualified health professionals and licensed professionals to go after the YouTubers and the social media influencers that are spreading a lot of myths and misinformation that's getting everybody tangled up and confused. And, you know, the people that land in my office will just sort of say, I'm so confused. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't feel great, so I do nothing. And that's not an approach either, right?
No.
So small changes can start really a beautiful path to long-term sustainable change. So even if you can just focus on one aspect of your diet, if that means starting on some, you know, fitness goals, or if that means like, you know, really trying to be more consistent with your water intake, or really trying to focus in on incorporating more probiotic rich foods, do it. That it's not all for nothing. It's going to start really making an impact and a change that will just fuel more change as we go along.
Yeah, start small.
Start small.
And build habits over time.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you've got to change everything all at once. You've got to work at it and know that that's just going to continue to build.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks for inviting me along, and I hope you enjoyed what we had to discuss today.
Yeah, it was very valuable. So thank you again. And yeah, hopefully we'll do this again sometime.
Of course.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.